Welcome to the lecture on social and personality psychology. Consider your best friend, mom, or even people you don't know very well. For any given behavior you observe them doing, you can likely come up with an explanation for that behavior. You might say, "Oh, my mom is just feisty," or "Beth is very emotional since her cat passed away." Heider classified two ways we explain other people's behavior in his attribution theory. According to the theory, behaviors can be explained as an expression of someone's individual traits, such as "my mom is feisty," or due to a particular situation, such as the death of a cat. We humans are biased and tend to make fundamental attribution errors quite often. These can be defined as situations where we underestimate the impact of a situation and overestimate the impact of a personal disposition. For example, if a student falls asleep in class, those around them tend to assume they're not serious, rather than consider an alternative explanation, such as they were at the hospital all night with their sick grandmother. Two fields of psychology developed to scientifically study the impact of traits and situations are social psychology and personality psychology. Personality psychology studies how different people act in any given situation. Social psychology is the study of how we are influenced by a situation. When it comes to understanding influences on our own behavior, we tend to not be very objective. Self-serving bias illustrates this point. Self-serving bias is the tendency for people to blame outside influences for any bad outcomes and to attribute any positive outcomes to personal traits. Take, for example, a football coach yelling at a referee. Say a coach drew up a play that didn't work so well and blames a ref for making a bad call in order to protect his own self-esteem. However, if the play had gone well, the coach would likely take credit for the positive outcome. In other words, we tend to put more emphasis on internal explanations when it comes to our own successes. Any introductory psychology course will cover famous historical studies in social psychology. Studies that may question the ethics involved, but nonetheless reveal interesting aspects of the human condition. It appears in many situations that our behaviors change due to the presence of others, and perhaps due to our understanding or interpretation of the social norms or the social roles we are playing in any given situation. To define these terms, social norms refer to group expectations regarding what is appropriate for the thoughts and behaviors of its members. Social roles are socially defined patterns of behavior expected of a person in a given group setting. For example, as members of a college community, there are certain norms in the classroom, such as staying off phone calls and speaking one at a time. There are also different roles, however, that can guide behavior. The role, and thus expected behaviors, of an instructor, for example, varies from that of a student in many ways, even though collectively there may be shared norms within the classroom. The way we feel toward particular people and situations changes how we act toward them, and vice versa. If we believe someone is threatening us, for example, we may feel anger toward that person and then act defensively. In this example, attitudes affect actions. Interestingly, the opposite relationship is also true. When people act and stand up for what they believe in, their attitudes and beliefs can become even stronger. An example might be attending a rally for your preferred presidential candidate. By taking that action, your belief may strengthen. The Stanford Prison Experiment is famous in social psychology for its ethical violations, but interesting to discuss as an example of how attitudes about a social role or social norms might influence behavior. Specifically, Phil Zimbardo and colleagues wanted to know whether prisoner-guard conflicts could be explained due to personality or situational factors. For example, prisoners and guards may have personalities which make conflict inevitable, with prisoners lacking respect for law and order and guards being domineering and aggressive. Alternatively, prisoners and guards may behave in a hostile manner due to the rigid power structure of the social environment of the prison. In this study, 24 college students with no psychiatric problems were randomly assigned to play the social role of either prisoner or guard. The situations they were put in were very realistic. Prisoners were treated like every other criminal, being arrested at their own homes without warning and taken to a local police station. They were fingerprinted, photographed, and booked. All guards were dressed in identical uniforms and carried a whistle around their neck and a billy club. Guards also wore special sunglasses to make eye contact with the prisoners impossible. Guards were instructed to do whatever they thought necessary to maintain law and order in the prison and to command the respect of prisoners without being physically violent. Initial reports suggested that guards became authoritarian and sadistic, while prisoners became subservient, anxious, and hopeless, so much so that the experiment ended early. The researchers attributed these behaviors to the power of social roles and social norms. Actions can also affect attitudes that we hold. Cognitive dissonance is a term used to describe the psychological discomfort that arises from a conflict in a person's behaviors, attitudes, or beliefs that run counter to the positive view they tend to hold of themselves. According to cognitive dissonance theory, we tend to be motivated to alleviate this discomfort by changing our attitudes to better align with our actions. As one example, a person may feel cognitive dissonance when they engage in the behavior of smoking, since it goes against their knowledge of the health risks related to smoking, and they believe themselves to be smart and responsible people. To reduce this discomfort, they may shift their beliefs about how much is truly known about the dangers of smoking. This allows the continued behaviors of smoking to still fit their positive self-perception. Another famous study in social psychology was done by Solomon Asch in the 1950s. We have all experienced a situation in which we've conformed to a group. This could be something as simple as ordering pizza when you really wanted Chinese food because the rest of the group was wanting Chinese food. Or something with more consequence, like trying a recreational drug because others around you are doing it. When we conform, we adjust our behavior to some group standard. Asch's conformity experiments typically consisted of participants completing a group vision test that required matching a standard line to one of 3 comparison lines. In reality, The individuals performing this task for Ash were working for Ash, all except for one, the true participant. And the study was really about the remaining participant and how this person would react to the other individuals or actors' behavior. On some trials, actors would provide obviously wrong responses. For example, that line 1 was the best match for the standard line. 75% of the participants in this study were found to conform to this obviously wrong answer at least once, meaning they too reported the obviously wrong answer simply because others in the group had also reported that answer. There were a number of follow-ups to Ash's conformity study. The results of these studies determined that people are more likely to conform, or, in the case of the study, choose the obviously incorrect line, in a number of different situations. For example, people are more likely to conform when they are made to feel incompetent or insecure. They are in a group of at least 3 other individuals who have provided the answer. They are in a group where all of the other individuals are in agreement. They are in a group in which they admire the status or attractiveness of the group, and when they have not made some other prior commitment to a response. The factors that influence conformity can be characterized as normative or informational social influences. We might conform to a group when we want them to like us, which would be an example of a normative social influence. When we conform to avoid rejection or gain social approval. Informational social influences are when we accept other people's reality because we desire to be accurate. So, for example, we think the group might know something that we don't, and we want to make a correct choice, so we conform to the choice. That would be an example of an informational social influence. We've covered a couple different studies and the factors that influence how an individual behaves in certain situations. When it comes to social roles dictating our behavior and conformity, it is clear that the presence of other individuals and how other individuals act and expect us to act can influence how we will then act. There are a number of ways in which our behaviors can change when we are in the presence of others, and just a few will be defined here. Social facilitation refers to improved performance when an audience is watching an individual perform a skill they excel at versus when the individual performs the behavior alone. In these scenarios, the physical arousal that comes from the presence of others fuels the ease with which a practice task is completed. Social loafing, on the other hand, is defined as less effort exerted by a person working within a group, often because individual performance cannot be evaluated separately from the group. Think of group projects in school and the group members that may have gotten away with doing nothing. Finally, group polarization is defined as the strengthening of an original group attitude after discussion of the views within the group. Group polarization explains many actions taken by groups that would not be undertaken by individuals. For example, it can be observed in the political arena, where certain platforms of a party might be supported by individuals who, when not in that group, would decline to support them. There are a number of tragic stories of individuals in distress who were not helped by people around them. When this occurs, it is known as the bystander effect, and a large body of work has been dedicated to bystander intervention research. This area of research focuses on the important question, when do people help other people? This work points to 3 factors that tend to shape the likelihood of people helping others. 2 of these factors relate to the social aspect, the presence of others. First, pluralistic ignorance is defined as the tendency for people to rely on others to define a situation and then coming to the conclusion that help is not needed. When people use the inaction of others to define their own course of action, the resulting pluralistic ignorance leads to less help being given overall. Second, if the bystander is alone, personal responsibility to help falls solely on the shoulders of that person. But knowing that someone else around could help seems to relieve bystanders of personal responsibility, so bystanders tend to not intervene. This phenomenon is known as diffusion of responsibility. Finally, it is likely that potential helpers engage in a cost-benefit analysis before getting involved in any scenario. If the needed help is of relatively low cost in terms of time, money, resources, or risk, then help is more likely to be given. For example, lending a classmate a pencil is easy. However, confronting an armed assailant is another scenario. Of course, not all people act in the same way in all situations. That is, the social situations certainly matter, but variations in personality can also matter to behavior. One of the most famous personality theories is the psychoanalytic perspective developed by Sigmund Freud. Freud's basic perspective is that human behavior and personality can be explained as an interaction between our conscious actions and thoughts and our unconscious desires. He believed that personality develops from a conflict between 2 forces, our biological aggressive and pleasure-seeking drives, and our internalized socialized control over these drives. Freud's personality theory is often explained using an iceberg metaphor. According to Freud, the id is a completely unconscious part of our personality that operates on the pleasure principle, meaning it acts without restraint and wants immediate gratification. The id, according to Freud's theory, strives to satisfy basic sexual and aggressive drives. The superego is partly conscious and partly unconscious, and is the moral part of our personality. It operates solely on what is right. As you can imagine, the superego is in direct conflict with the id. The resolution of this conflict, or lack of resolution, is what determines our personality. The ego's job is to manage this conflict. The ego is the mostly conscious part of our personality that operates on the reality principle, which satisfies the id's desires in realistic ways that will bring long-term pleasure, not just immediate gratification. These internal struggles between the conscious and unconscious, the id and the superego, certainly can lead to the experience of distress and anxiety. Particularly, we may feel increased stress when our ids, or our impulses and need for instant gratification, win out. So how is it that individuals can cope with all of this stress? Freud argued that our egos are equipped with defense mechanisms. All defense mechanisms begin with the theoretical process of repression, where we stuff our anxieties deep into the unconscious parts of our minds. Some additional examples of defense mechanisms include regression, which is defined as retreating to a more infantile psychosexual stage; reaction formation, which is where we switch unacceptable impulses into their opposites, such as when we are angry at someone, instead displaying exaggerated friendliness; projection, where we disguise our own threatening impulses by attributing them to others. So if we are a thief, pointing out other people that are thieves; rationalization, which is offering self-justifying explanations in place of real, more threatening reasons for our actions. So for example, a problem drinker rationalizing their drinking behavior as just being sociable. Displacement, when we shift our aggressive impulses toward a more acceptable or less threatening object or person. An example of this might be kicking a dog when you're actually angry at your mother or partner. And then denial, which is when individuals refuse to believe or even perceive painful realities, such as refusing to acknowledge evidence of someone's affair. Another framework for how individuals develop their individuality is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This framework states that 5 categories of human needs dictate an individual's behavior, and we must meet these needs in order. According to this model, all behavior is motivated by self-actualizing tendencies, or the need to achieve our fullest potential, located at the top of the hierarchy. At the lowest level are humans' most basic needs, such as food and warmth, followed by needs such as safety and employment. At the next level are social needs, including friendship and intimacy, followed by the final category before self-actualization, esteem. Emotional and behavioral differences can arise as a result of failing to meet, or meeting at different times and ways, these hierarchical needs. In other words, personality develops as we move through the hierarchy. Another theorist was Carl Rogers. One of Rogers' main ideas about personality regards self-concept, which is our thoughts and feelings about ourselves. If your response to the question, "Who am I?" is primarily positive, then you tend to feel good about who you are and you see the world as a safe and positive place. If your response is mainly negative, then you may feel unhappy with who you are. Rogers further divided the self into 2 categories, the ideal self and the real self. The ideal self is the person that you would like to be. The real self is the person you actually are. Rogers focused on the idea that we need to achieve consistency between these 2 selves. We experience congruence when our thoughts about our real self and our ideal self are very similar. In other words, when our self-concept is accurate. Trait theorists focus less on how characteristic behaviors might develop through experience and focus more on describing personality. They believe personality can be understood by the approach that all people have certain traits or characteristic ways of behaving. For example, is someone sociable or shy, passive or aggressive, optimistic or pessimistic? Early trait theorists tried to describe as many individual traits as possible, some with thousands of individual traits in their theories. Cattell's proposal shown in the slide narrowed this down to 16 traits, which include things like warmth, liveliness, vigilance, and perfectionism. While some view Cattell's 16 factors as too broad, other proposals over the years have been considered too narrow. One trait theory that's held up is the 5-factor model. This hits a middle ground with 5 factors referred to as the Big Five personality traits. It's a very popular theory in personality psychology. The 5 traits in this model are openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, and these are often remembered through the use of the mnemonic OCEAN. In the 5-factor model, each person has a trait, but they occur along a spectrum. For example, openness to experience, those with high levels of this are curious and have a wide range of interests, while those low on openness are practical and conventional. Those with high levels of conscientiousness are hardworking, dependable, and organized, while those with low levels of conscientiousness are impulsive, careless, and disorganized. Those with high levels of extroversion are outgoing, warm, and seek adventure, while those with low levels are quiet, reserved, and withdrawn. Those with high levels of agreeableness are helpful, trusting, and empathetic. Those with lower levels are critical, uncooperative, and suspicious. And finally, neuroticism, which is the tendency toward unstable emotions. People with high levels of neuroticism are anxious and unhappy, while with low levels, those have calm, even-tempered natures.